Yeah.
worries.
What's up, everybody? Hello, and welcome to another sensational episode of Downtime with Initiative Rolls. I'm your host, Richard Darshwood, and joining me yet again is our good friend John Cowgell with the Night Owl Gaming Society. How you doing, good sir?
Doing well. How about yourself, sir?
I am fantastic. So we have a very interesting, informal, and informative chat ahead of us where we will be talking about homebrew campaign settings and world building. So if you've ever struggled with this, which I know I have, or have an interest in homebrewing your own campaign, or maybe you're just intrigued by learning the process, then buckle up and get ready for a ride, guys. But before we get into it, I want to remind you to take a brief moment to hit the like and subscribe button on this video. It's the best way to make sure that you and others get a chance to see more of our videos. John here has been with me on a handful of other episodes. I'll drop some links in the description below. He has proven time and time again that he has a seemingly endless supply of great advice for dungeon masters and players of the game Dungeons & Dragons, as well as other tabletop role-playing games you may be running with your friends. So I know you are going to be getting a head full of information today just by listening to this. So let's just start with the basics. John, what is the first thing that someone should consider when attempting to create their own homebrew?
It sounds amusing. It's going to sound very counterintuitive, but almost don't do it. Well, let me rephrase. Creating your own homebrew world is a wonderful thing. It is a wonderful thing to get into, to have to put your fingers in that clay and mold it around. But it is an undertaking, and it can be an undertaking. And if it's not something you want to dedicate the time to, don't do it. There are plenty of other worlds out there that other companies have created. There's plenty of one-shot modules that you can link together. There's a bunch of wonderful created world-building content already. And if you feel that it's something you don't wish to do, that's okay. Because again, there are so many other things. But if you do have the taste for world building, then you're going to want to, in my opinion, the best way to start is to take a look at some of the older mythological stuff in the world, like the Egyptian mythos, the Roman mythos, the Greek mythos, all of that, to get an idea of how the world would have started. At least that's where I started with mine.
Got it. Yes. Going back to your original thought there, I constantly find myself giving advice, not just to other dungeon masters, but just people in general. When they're asking about advice or asking for advice, I try to remind people that you should always enjoy the process. You have an end goal in mind. If it's frustrating you, but not succeeding in accomplishing a goal, then you're probably not doing it for the right reasons. What I mean by that is part of the joy of the process of whatever it is you're doing should be gratifying enough. Definitely put in the work, of course. I mean, there's a lot of things that you won't ever succeed unless you put, get to the grindstone and really try and put an effort into something, which is not always going to be fun. But if you enjoy the process, that makes it gratifying enough. And world building is a sensational process. I've definitely enjoyed, dabbling in a little bit. My first campaign, when I started DMing a little bit more consistently of recent days, was sort of a spring off from a campaign setting that already exists. I basically just took the Forgotten Realms setting and I just imagined what it would be like 200 years from now, 250 years from now, whatever. And that was a really fun way to do it because I already had a nice layout of like the cosmos and the cosmology and the deities and all that kind of stuff, and of course the maps. All the hard work was really done, so I got to do only the fun stuff. But then again, some people do enjoy making maps and making cosmologies and creating deities. Now I understand you have a world that you've been working on almost your entire existence as a DM.
Yeah, the player world that I've been using has been in flux and creation for the last 20 years now. The nickname of the world is Adrift. Well, not the nickname, that's what I've actually called it. It's been a labor of love, definitely, because it's something I always enjoyed. When I created the world way back when, I wanted a perfect sandbox that options were all there were so many options players and the DM could use, and I came up with the idea of a world that bounces around in the cosmic scheme of things, that it does not have one real home. And we can get more into that in a little bit. That every time it hits other dimensions, rifts and portals open up and stuff falls through, which is a perfect foil to get PCs in and out of the world if necessary.
Yeah.
And it's started from a very simple idea of the ease of dropping players in and out, and has evolved into a huge part of the cosmology.
Yeah. So where did you start with that? I mean, obviously it's grown to what it is now, which is probably there's several layers and depths to what this world has. Um, but when you first ran an adventure in it, what did you have? What were the bones looking like?
The bones were extremely, you're popped up into a forest and you have no idea what's happening.
Of
It
course.
was because I really didn't know it was something so basic, so barren. I think I actually ran in a drift, and I didn't even have a name for it. Back then it was Area 5012.
That's funny. Does that actually come into play anywhere? Does anyone use that terminology in your game today?
No,
Be
because
interesting to prop that in for those who
I
know.
never told them about it back then.
Oh,
This was
really?
all up
Gotcha.
here. It was
That
all
was your,
written in the background.
yeah.
And then I finally coined the term once that particular part of my cosmology started, and people latched onto it because they loved it. And that has populated since for people that's played in it.
Well, then in other words, what you're telling people is that they could essentially, if they have any interest at all in starting their own world, they could just jump into it without putting any work into it to begin with,
Yeah.
and just kind of let it flesh itself out. Um,
That's correct.
yeah.
Something I've done with my players, and I think I've mentioned on here before, I love the fact that I can let my players write 80 to 90% of the game. I
Bingo.
have basic building blocks, and then I'll sit and listen to them throw up theories and ideas. And while I'm not going to tell them that's something I haven't written yet, I'm going to go, oh yes, that's wonderful. Let's keep that written. Yeah.
Yeah. Probably like around like the 2 or 3 mark on the list of top 5 things that DMs should be doing. Take notes, and while in sessions, while your players are talking, take notes and reflect on them later and see what you can do with it. Because my gosh, you're absolutely right. In many cases, your players can write a good majority of your campaign setting for you.
Right.
Which is really kind of cool. And another part of it is they only need to know what is pertinent to them. So your world may only extend as far as the village where the first adventure takes place, and then you can build out from there. You don't need to know what the name of the king is 7 kingdoms away. You don't need to know the 30 different gods, because your cleric doesn't worship any of those. You just need to know the stuff that's pertinent to them, and that's you can almost come up with on the fly, just as long as you're consistent. That's why you want to keep your notes, guys. Keep your notes.
Oh, yeah. And the thing is, something that I did, my cosmology was based not on something I created out of the blue, but was actually based on a group of my players that I'd played with for years. Each of my 6 deities are actually PCs that were once played by some of my dear friends in other games that we had played together. And I actually ran them in what I called a god campaign, which actually took the PCs and elevated them in the godhood. And then they were transplanted ad hoc as deities in my new realm.
Hell yeah. That must have been a blast to play.
Oh, it was wonderful. It myself and 2 or 3 of the players, we ended up playing. One of them was a manager at Laser Blaze, the local laser tag arena, and we came in right before close one day and ordered 3 or 4 pizzas, a whole bunch of caffeine, and then locked up, and we were in there until open the next morning.
Playing this adventure.
Playing this adventure, eating pizza, not sleeping, and playing laser tag. So.
Oh, okay, I gotcha. So there was a purpose in having it at the laser tag place. We found some time to shoot each other as well.
but that was how a couple of 3 of my gods ended up being elevated. Was that particular?
Hell yeah. Frame. That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, for anyone that doesn't have, that option per se, what do you think is a good way to build a cosmology? If someone's looking for some inspiration, to create a pantheon of gods.
Well, research and reference is always a good thing. And as you've seen my nerd wall from behind me, I actually have some similar things that we can use.
Cool.
A moment here. I'm going to remove some of my trinkets because I've been in the business for a long time. We've got some old school stuff. If you're looking for a good listing of them, old school deities and demigods from the first edition.
Wow, that's a throwback.
Has some good stuff.
Interesting. Okay.
Also, you have something from 2nd edition. If you're looking for something for non-human deities like dwarves, elves, halflings, and stuff, and for monsters, You have got monster mythology,
Oh, I
and
remember
these are
that one.
good
Yeah.
supplements that that have information on. For example, a lot of people know the basic idea of the chief deity of elves or dwarves or gnomes. This particular monster mythology gives the entire pantheon.
Awesome. 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 Awesome.
Not
And
only
even
that, I would suggest. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, even the 5e Dungeon Master's Guide has, a great section about, building, creating gods, and a whole list
Oh
of,
yeah.
there's a ton of gods that currently exist in the D&D multiverse that is known, expands across many campaign settings that exist in the
Hmm.
D&D worlds. And you're more than welcome to pull from those, and just, I mean, that's part of being a god, is that you're interplanetary, you're interplanar, um, you're interdimensional even. So no
Yeah.
reason why, Merkel or the Raven Queen, or even Corleone can be can worshipped in all these different worlds. I like to look
Exactly.
at.
And then
I was gonna say, I like to look at our mythology as well, like our real world ancient mythology. I mean, you already talked about, Egypt and Rome. The Vikings have a very interesting set of gods. Indigenous people of America, as well as Australia, have a very interesting pantheon of gods. The Hindu and the Vedic scriptures talk about a vast, diverse group of deities that oversee the world. So lots of places draw inspiration for that.
there's also not only that, but you can also go into popular fiction. For
Mm-hmm.
example, there is I don't remember the author off the top of my head, and we can probably look that up. But there's a series of novels called "The Incarnations of Immortality," which is where I got the idea for how my god structure, my cosmology works. Right, my gods
Mm-hmm.
being offices rather than actually born creations, where people would ascend to godhood if one person got tired of being up there.
Right.
Go to a lot of popular books, a lot of popular series. Margaret Wise and Tracy Hickman, they wrote the Dragonlance stuff, and all of their gods and deities are in their novels as well. Plus, they wrote several different other books like the Deathgate Cycle, and they have its own cosmology and its own setting there. A lot of these folks, a lot of these popular novels will have these god settings popped in, and it's stuff that you can. While I would not suggest stealing ad hoc, you can definitely pull out information and pull out. The words escape me, pull out something that will inspire you to be able
Yeah.
to pull up your
Yeah.
character.
Of course. And then, of course, you can also go the super easy route and have a monotheistic world.
Yeah.
There's no harm in having a world that has no gods per se. You
Yeah.
know, maybe you don't even have to come up for a reason with it, but it could be a world that their belief system is strictly science based. They have no need for theology whatsoever, so you can go around
Well,
that.
that depends on what type of game you're running as well. If you're running some sort of technology based or
Hmm.
kind of like cyberpunk inspired game that does
Yep.
not have magic, as it would say, then there was no reason for having gods there. There's no deific or divine magic.
Right.
If you're playing a game that doesn't normally delve into, is a fantasy, but you're not choosing to have gods, then it's a wonderful explanation. Well, is there divine magic? If so, where does it come from? Is there no such
Right.
thing as divine magic? And that fuels other questions to go through.
Yeah, I think that's what it comes down to is, if you're going to build a world, you just need to ask yourself a series of questions, and then come up with the answers for them.
Yeah.
So if you're talking about the magic, we've got a lot of different campaign things that come to mind already, where the more common D&D world is Faerun, the worlds of Beer and Teril. And there they have the weave, which to me, I kind of liken it to the forest. It's just like this
Yeah.
immaterial, primordial, like ethereal essence that very few people know and can interact with, but those of us who can have the power to manipulate it and cast spells.
Hmm.
There is the world of Athos from the Dark Sun setting, where,
Yeah.
oh, it's very interesting there. All of the magic is derived from organic life forms, specifically plant life, which is why the damn planet is now completely covered in sand and silt, because the great sorcerer kings have extracted so much magical energy from it that they've killed off the entire planet. It's a really fascinating campaign
And
setting.
why they call mages there defilers, because anytime you cast a spell, it literally will draw the essence and defile an area around you, depending on the
Yeah.
level.
Yeah, it's very difficult to play a wizard in that campaign
Oh
setting
yeah.
for sure. And then there's lots of other ones. I'm working on one right now where there is basically it's kind of a little bit of both, where it's actually the plant life contains the magic essence, but when it's consumed, people are able to absorb the magical essence themselves, and those who are a little bit more touched than others can cast spells innately. Those that maybe not so much, you take a more wizardly type approach and have to, have books and study, but they still need the plant life in order to sustain their arcane abilities.
So it's
And
literally the plant light's almost like a reagent and a necessity for them to be able to cast.
precisely, right. So it kind of lends itself to a world that is very symbiotic with nature. Which is, I mean, I'm just now starting to build this world. We'll see where it takes us, and maybe after this, I'll have a lot more questions to ask myself as far as where we go to take it.
Fair enough.
So with that in mind, we got we're bringing it down levels. We've gone from the heavens, and I guess in that same regard, the depths below with like the underworld and whatnot. So we have
Right.
our gods figured out. If we are going to use gods. Now we've talked a little bit about magic and how that works in. What's the next level? Do we talk about geography and like world politics?
Well, that's the thing. Geography and world politics is something that either can be a huge cornerstone or it can be something you don't deal with. I mean, I'm a huge proponent of making maps. To this day, Adrift does not have a physical map as of yet. That's something I'm going to be tackling this year because everything else is up here how I want to see it. So I can address them around, but I don't have anything written down. And the world politics, depending on what part of the world you're dealing with, depends on where the politics hit. And those are constantly in flux. And those are things that if you're going to have a political campaign or something that really relies on geography, feel free to create those. That's fine, but it's also not a necessity.
Right. Okay, so I actually have decided, working on my world, I don't want to build a map either. that's part of that. That's part of that work that doesn't really sound like fun to me. But
yeah,
I have played around with some of the great tools that are available online. There's Incarnate, and I can drop a link for that down below. It's the only one that I've really played with, and they have a free option. You can pay for a premium membership, and you get a lot more bells and whistles with it. But it is pretty easy and fun to take a template. And the tools they have for making maps are literally just, point and click, and then boom, there's a mountain, point and click, and then boom, there's a sea. So it's really, it is a little fun to play with that. I just haven't taken the time to, dive a little deeper into that. But there was a part of me that thought maybe I would just, find somebody who does enjoy doing that kind of stuff and say, hey, just throw together a random map for me, and then I'll just fill in the blanks, and I'll just establish this region as that particular world that's where the certain things are taking place, and kind of build it out from where the adventure takes place.
Fair enough. And that's something similar I've got in my world. There are certain pieces that I have already mentally kind of created, like the entire third of my main continent is a huge old forest called the Tangled Skein, and that's a huge part of my adventuring process for them. But other than that, I don't have a lot of things. One thing I've wanted to do, and I love the idea of taking something basic and throwing it to an actual cartographer or somebody who does fantasy maps.
Sure.
I'm going to be using the dice, the dice property.
Yeah. I don't know if we've talked about that on the show before, but talk about that because I think this is fascinating. Everybody should try this just for shits and giggles. Why not? Give it a go.
Well, first of all, you have got to have a handful of dice. Honestly, in my opinion, the more dice, the better.
Of course.
You're going to assign something to each die. For example, let's say a D4 is a city, a D6 is a town, a D8 is a special feature like a temple or a hidden city or something like that, and a D12s are mountains and stuff. And depending on what type of what's the word I'm looking for? What type of density of population or density of creations you want, you pepper more or less pieces. Like if you want more forests, you put more D12s in. If you want more mountains, you put more D4s or whatever in. Then once you take that entire group of dice, and like I said, the more dice, the better, you have a big piece of paper, depending on how big you want your world to be, or at least your main continent that people will explore. Then you drop all the dice on it.
Yeah.
And you will take the dice, you will take the information, you'll be able to make a basic coastline around the dice, and wherever stuff falls,
Yeah.
That's like, okay, well, there's something there that I need to work on. There's something over here that I need to work on. And you'll have a basic idea, including islands, including peninsulas and stuff, of how your world may look. And
Yeah.
then from there, you can take that information, say, okay, fantasy person, here's the basic shape. Here's the stuff that I know where it's located. Here's what I want. And here's some ideas. Let me see what you have.
Yeah, I love that. I'm a huge proponent of the idea that creativity is really sparked by limitations. Being that if you're given a complete blank page and you're told to do something with it, it's very likely that I'm going to stare at that blank page for hours, days, weeks, and months before I even decide to put pen to paper. But if you give me some kind of limitations, in this case, a random set of dice you can throw out there and you say that's what you have to work with, that to me sounds like a lot of fun.
Oh yeah.
Have you considered using the numbers on the die to represent something? Like if you happen to throw the dice out there and you roll a 4 on a die, maybe that is a volcano as opposed to, just a basic, mountain, or maybe it's a dormant volcano or something like that.
I have not. That's a wonderful idea.
I don't know. I mean, I'm just thinking like because you have options there. Because you're dealing with a lot of randomization, and maybe your 20-sided dice could be cities, and then the numbers that pop up could be, multipliers of something to the population, right?
Yeah.
Something I would stress to people, who are interested in building maps and building worlds is not let yourself get too caught up in the realism. Because we are talking about a fantasy world. And what I mean by that is I think some folks, myself included, may originally be inclined to try and make sense of everything as, trying to say, why would I have these two towns and cities right next to each other? And yet the next closest one is, 400 miles away. Is there any, trade outposts in between? Is there anything that's going on? Like, why are these cities so far apart? Because in reality, we know, well, maybe we don't know, but if you do a little bit of homework, you discover the reason why cities, get built is for some specific reason. And it's mostly has to do with travel and trade. Most of our cities were settled, or most of our towns were settled because they decided this was a good, firm launchpad point for whatever our endeavors were going to be, whether it was a river town or a lake town or a coastal city with a harbor. Those were big things. And then farming communities, some of the farming communities just eventually built up and grew and grew and grew. And now there's like major cities where there isn't water thoroughfares or very much else around. Those are questions that you can kind of answer later, but your players may not really care. So you don't have to let yourself get too caught up in it. Right.
Exactly. Again, it's not exactly a fog of war idea,
yeah,
but it's writing what is necessary as the players go through and answering their questions to help create the reasoning for the world.
Right.
Again, it's having your players write a lot of your campaign for you.
Precisely. Right. So let's scale it down a little bit more. We'll dial in some more, I guess. Now we're talking about the geography and the world itself. Let's talk about like the settlements themselves and like kingdom cities. What's your approach to establishing those sort of things? Do you deal much with the lore on, your downtime, or?
I try to. There's several, for example, going back to my world, there are several cities that are in place, and some of them are dedicated to great battles that have happened. A couple of them are dedicated to being patron cities of a particular god, just in general for the names, and some of them are built around architectural features or natural features in the world. For example, there's something in my world called Rift Magic. It's actually a school of magic unto itself that deals with the wild magic in the area, that when two places bump into each other, a rift opens, things fall through. It happens. Got it. There is 2 or 3 major confluences of that in the area, and one of them is one of my main cities was built around. They actually have a complete and total city division dedicated to going out every day to this particular rift and making sure they collect anybody that's fallen through, bring them in, and let them know what's happened.
Oh, that's really fascinating, and I think that really opens things up to prevent yourself from being limited in certain ways. You probably had a lot of fun dealing with that kind of stuff and like the randomness that occurs with that sort of thing.
Every day, and this is something my players don't know, every day there is a small chart that I have that I roll a couple of dice on to see if they're near any rifts, B, if any rifts happen to open around them, and C, if so, who or what falls through.
Is there a pretty low percentage on that, or is it highly probable that stuff's going to happen to them?
Depends on where they are.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, that's cool. Awesome, 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 awesome. So that's another thing too. Worth talking about is certain regions and what activity is going on there. A question to ask yourself is, is our adventure taking place in a region or an area that is heavily populated and there's a lot of activity going on, or is it very like maybe it's only populated by monsters and the creepy crawlies, maybe you have an area that has been desolate for a long time and therefore maybe it is now haunted and overrun by zombies and skeletons and banshees and specters that terrorize in the night. So lots of different questions to ask yourself, and those can be answered with a simple roll of a die.
Indeed they can.
A lot of that stuff is very handy for us in the Dungeon Master's Guide in the form of a random table. And I've had a lot of fun just imagining certain scenarios that may or may not actually end up in next week's game just by rolling a die and seeing if it's a probability. And if I don't like the outcome, I'll just roll again.
Which is fair, because as the DM, you are the gods. You are allowed to do that if you wish.
And I think one of the things I asked myself in the first one that I talked about, where it was the land of Faerun, but like propelled like 200 years in the future,
right?
Like we took a little alternate universe sort of approach to it, and I basically asked myself in the same manner that I believe probably a either a sociologist or maybe even a anthropologist would ask themselves is, what things knowing what I know about the world as it exists, written and canonized, would evolve. And my take on it was this was a place where, and I say alternate timeline, I guess would be the more appropriate way of putting it, because in the world of Faerun, there was what we call the spell plague. This is canon in the timeline where basically for a number of years, I think like close to 10 years, magic was extremely scarce. Something happened to the weave, and some wizards were driven mad and went crazy and committed suicide, or just inadvertently expired from just going insane, and magic was lost for a short period of time. Then it came back. And there's a whole storyline behind how it came back and why it came back. But I decided, what if it stayed like that? What if magic was extremely scarce in this world? How would people evolve beyond that? And so I thought, well, maybe they would turn more to technology. So maybe eventually people would begin to work more towards sort of like a steampunk environment or developed world where we have railroads now, and there is the invention of textile manufacturing. And to be honest, I don't even know in the world of Faerun as it is canonized now whether or not there is a printing press. But I know in our world that when that was invented, it changed a whole heck of a lot, because now communication could be written and mass produced and then sent across the world, which is why religions, more specifically Christianity, became a very strong force in the Western world as we know it, because the Bible was printed 1,000,000 times over. So in this world, I basically took what I knew about Faerun and I created a world where they're developing railroads, they're developing steel mill manufacturing, they have like one permeating religion, because that happened to be the one that took advantage of the printing press and made a lot of books and manuscripts about it. And it became like the driving force of that world.
It's turning the original cosmology, original deities into the old gods, kind of like Christianity did with the pagan ancestry.
Precisely. Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing is with the spell plague. Part of it was the gods were just not around anymore. And so I just kind of kept that as it were, like the gods for some reason were not interacting with mortal beings, which is something that's kind of funny. We see that a lot in mythology. Going back to our discussion on the cosmology, we see that a lot in like Greek mythology, in actually in all the myths that I can think of. There's a lot of stories about gods interacting with people, but I don't know if we put a lot of that in our adventures. I don't know how often that happens in your campaigns, but I rarely have a god come down say hello and tap the adventurers on the shoulder just to give them a little bit of advice. It has happened that they don't know about it because they don't
Right.
recognize that person as a deity. It has happened, but I don't know. Is that something you ever play around with?
Yes and no.
Okay.
The reason being is my gods, being that they have the ability to ascend up to the office, were mortal at one time.
Right.
So they actually they don't have an avatar. They will actually transform themselves temporarily into their mortal form, and they will walk the plains. They will walk the
Hmm.
world, and you may run into them. You may not know who they are, but you'll run
Yeah.
into them. And being that they have been around for thousands of years, and they have a bunch of stuff that they have to deal with that they get bored and don't want to deal with, yeah, they'll muck and talk to PCs and the people in general, in a sense, quite often because they are extremely bored and they miss being able to interact with folks that are not other gods.
Yeah. 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 Man. Um, Okay, cool. So let's talk about what this does to our rules and whatnot. When you create your own world, are there certain things that you have to do outside of the traditional rules as written? Do you write, brand new magic items? Do you create new spells, things like that?
Well, again, that is a wonderful question. And I will keep going back to Adrift since that's my
Sure, of
particular
course.
super stuff. Adrift started in Dungeons and Dragons, and while I can take the idea of it and mold it into whatever game system hits, it is based on the idea of Dungeons and Dragons. And in that sense, my world is a Nexus world. It exists in all realities. Then there are stuff from all different campaign stuff that is still available. The classics things, the spells of Mordenkainen have flown through, the
Hmm.
spells of Tasha, the spells of Otto, the spells of Everard, the spells of Bigby. All of those traditional spells have flowed through. So there are mages there that have access to those normal spell casting and have used those wizard spells for years. There are variations and there are versions of the basic priest spells and the casting spells that are provided by every type of deity, because no matter
Right.
what deity you're in, you're still going to have access to that same basic selection of divine inspired spells there. There are certain spells, for example, there are two brand new schools of magic in my realm that do not exist in the other ones. There is rift magic, which is a combination of teleportation and transmogrification that combines the idea of creating a space one place and actually popping up in another. Imagine if you were 30 feet away and I cast a spell and a little black hole showed up in front of me. I put my fist through it and a little black hole shows up in front of your face and the fist comes out and punches you. That is part of the rift magic, utilizing the wild magic and the rifts that open up to be able to cause different spells to take effect that way.
That's rad.
And I also have a spell, a school of magic called cartoonomancy.
Okay, explain. Tell us more.
Just imagine if all the classic Warner Brothers and Tom and Jerry and all the shenanigans that happened.
Of course.
Imagine if a wizard was adept at taking the weave, at taking the arcane ether and transforming it to do those particular things.
Okay.
Hiding, basically, you cast a stealth spell with cartoonomancy and you hide behind a pole, and all of a sudden your body shrinks.
Yes.
And you are exactly that thing. If one of the rules, if you cast unknown gravity, you can walk off a cliff, and as long as you don't look down, you're not going to fall.
Right. Okay, cool.
Stuff like that. And I have an entire list of spells that have information on those, and also have bastardizations of classic spells that are
Nice.
a little changed because of cartoon magic.
I'm thinking also of like the invisible pocket of holding, where basically you can just reach behind your back and pull out any giant sledgehammer or anvil to
Mhm.
drop on somebody or whatever you want.
But it
Just
only
always
works in the
easy to reach.
instance.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's
Because
fun.
actually there is a term for that in anime. It's called hammer space. And that's because in a lot of animes you'll see the female protagonist reach nowhere, pull out the giant hammer to hit somebody she's upset with. The term hammer space
Oh, I
came
love
into
that. I did not know that.
so yeah, it's the wazoo or hammer space. But yeah, that is actually one of the similar ones I've gotten, and I've been created this for, oh God, 10 years or so, and I love the
Yeah,
idea of it.
yeah.
But so I've got a couple of special schools of magic there, and of course, in my world, there's going to be separate magical items that are not available in the other realms.
Hmm.
Of course, there is going to be the availability of the regular magical items in my realms,
Hmm.
but I have specific magical items that have been created in this realm by the wizards that live, or the wizards and creations in the drift, that are not available anywhere else.
So when you go about creating those things, whether they're magic items or spells, and Actually, let me break this up in a two-part question. Let me go
Sure.
back to spells for a moment.
Okay.
How do you determine the level of a spell? If one of your players is going, because I'm sure some of your players can use these
Oh
homebrewed
yeah.
spells, right?
Oh yeah, of course.
What method do you use to determine the level of a spell?
Well, what I will do, and what I've done for years, is I will sit down, especially in whatever system I'm running. Let's say fifth edition. I will sit down and I will pull out the spells for, let's say, third level.
Mm-hmm.
In Wizard is a very it's kind of like turning 21 when you're an
Mm-hmm.
adult and you can start drinking. Third level is
Right.
where you get your fireball, where you get
Yeah.
your lightning bolt, where you get to launch your big evocation spells,
Yeah.
where they're not exactly utility, but they are the standard that the wizard goes, oh crap, blow it up.
Right.
Those type of spells. You'll take a look at level 3 right there and take a look at the list of spells that it gains the ability to: invisibility, fireball, lightning bolt. And you're going to take a look and see the levels of power that it gives, what the
Mm-hmm.
average damage of that does. And
Yeah.
then you'll take a look at the spell you have, what the effects are going to be, how game breaking they can be, what damage it does, and kind of compare it to one of the levels. And that'll give you an idea of where you need to put that particular spell level wise, based on the utility and the game breakiness, for lack of a better term, because that's what Magic does. It allows a player to break the game
Yeah.
in creative and simple ways. And once you've compared it to that list, you'll know in an idea where in the power level scheme, what circle of what circle of thought it should go into.
That's awesome. Okay, great. That's actually very, very helpful for me. I hope whoever's watching this gets some good information from that too, because creating spells has been a bit intimidating, but I've always wanted to, and it's for that reason. But that, I mean, you just laid it up very, very easily for me, so that's awesome. So let's talk about magic items then. Do you have a rating system for your magic items as far as like rarity and such?
Yes and no.
Okay.
There are some simple magical items
Mhm.
that, in my opinion, because of the vast magic of the world, become more readily available, because magic in itself is a more what's the word I'm looking for? It is a more tangible asset, because the entire place is wreathed in this weird magic, and there's
Mhm.
people that have learned to take the magic and siphon it and actually utilize it. So I'm playing a fairly high magic campaign, so there's a lot of magical mumbo jumbo going on. Some of the smaller common magical items are much readily available. However, there are some unique things that there are one or two pieces that have been created. For example, I have a throwaway magical item that I use a lot that people enjoy, the cloak of the octopus that I have created.
Okay.
It is you wear it and it actually feels like seal skin on the outside, and it feels very warm on the inside. It's almost like a fur. It's waterproof, and when you go and submerge yourself, it automatically creates the spell airy water or breathe water, depending on your region,
Hmm.
that allows you to breathe. It grants you a swim speed and grants you free action. And then I believe 3 times a day it allows you to produce either create darkness, or it
Ah,
allows you to cast Edward's black tentacles to
yeah,
come out
nice.
and utilize
Nice.
as
That's
attacks.
cool. That's cool. Yeah, so that's what I've had a lot of fun with when I'm doing magic items is um my process so far has been find a picture of something that looks cool. And then I mean, it's honestly been my process. I find a picture of something that looks cool. And then I start to ask myself certain questions like, what does this thing do?
Mhm.
And a lot of times, it provides the ability to cast a spell. So then I'm thinking very much like you did, like running on the theme of whatever flavor this item has, what kind of spells would it be? And something like, I mean, as soon as you said cast darkness, what was it, the exact spell that it cast? There's the tentacles
It
and then
create darkness,
create darkness. Yeah.
and then Edward's black tentacles.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I'm clearly giving the image of inky black substance coming
Mhm.
out from this thing, and then poof, you got your darkness. So you can totally keep things on flavor. Just by having a general idea of what the item is intended to do, and you can kind of pick and search from what's available. Number of resources for grabbing magical items as well. If you want to just pick some up that have already been homebrewed, or
Mhm.
just draw inspiration from. I mean, people are very, very open and giving to the community as far as providing that information to us.
Oh
Lots of
yeah,
it, lots of stuff out
D&D
there.
Beyond has an entire section on just homebrew stuff that people pop up, and that includes items they've created. If you want to ever take a look at stuff there.
Yeah, yeah. I actually forget about that. I drastically underused D&D Beyond, um, And I know it's just such a wealth of information there as well. Yeah, of course.
Something that I've done and something that I actually got from TikTok of all places. There is a TikToker that actually creates random magical items off of the trinket table in the PHB in
Oh,
5th
that's
Ed.
funny.
There
Yeah.
is a D100 list of trinkets, and they will, every time they do a TikTok, they'll roll a D100, find what it is, and they will create a magical item based on that trinket, just a
That's cool.
generalized small one.
That's
Sometimes it's
cool.
cursed, sometimes it's really powerful, sometimes it's minor light globe or something, but they will exercise their creative juices by saying,
Yeah.
okay, well, here's the description. Oh, look, it's a dead mummified rat.
Yeah.
Uh,
And that's been a lot of fun. I mean, you've been in our initiative roles class. You see that we do the exact same thing. We have an
mhm,
exercise which is literally just called magic item, where I start with a pin and I say, like, this is a magic pen. What does it do? And I start asking everybody in the room, in the virtual room, a different characteristic of what this magic pen does. And I've gotten all
mhm,
kinds of interesting things. I mean, very common. I'll see stuff like it's a pen that never runs out of ink. Or you might get somebody say it's a pen that writes invisible ink, or you may have somebody say it's a pen that writes, but when you choose to, it can become invisible. So, and then some people have said it turns into a dart gun, shoots poisonous darts. I mean, you can just get really creative and do silly things. Just let your imagination run wild. Throw stuff on the wall, see what sticks. I keep a lot of notes. I have several notebooks all around the house when inspiration is just arrives, then I'll write something down. I also keep a dry erase board in the kitchen and actually have one at work, which probably looks pretty suspect because it's at work and it says things like lich phylactery. And then it says like scrambled eggs next to it. It's just like it doesn't make any sense to people that are walking by, and they probably think I'm a creep guy based on that alone. But no, they know I'm not really a creepy guy.
yeah, I know you're
Anyway,
not a creepy guy.
thank you for vouching for me. For anyone who thinks I'm a creepy guy because I think scrambled eggs could be a lich's phylactery, shame on you. I have people that will back me up and say different. With that in mind, what else can you think of that's helpful for people that maybe want to dive into the homebrew world or the experience of homebrewing stuff?
Well, there is a huge homebrewing community for
Yeah.
Dungeons and Dragons and other game systems out there. And there are a lot of different researchers. If you simply type in homebrew and what edition, for example, homebrew 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, you're going to find millions of hits for different websites to go take a look at people that have posted their examples. Do not ever feel that homebrewing, creating a world on your own, creating character classes, creating subclasses, creating races, creating spells or magical items is a necessity. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
yes, it is a wonderful thing to do, and it's great to have your own flavor on stuff, but it's never something you have to do.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of resources out there of stuff that is published work like mine and behind me or yours behind you.
Mm-hmm.
There is a whole bunch of published works that you can use. There's a whole bunch of stuff that people have created and put online for free that you can take a look at and use ad hoc because they've said, hey, please, here's my information, use that.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't ever have to feel the need that, oh, I have to create something, because you don't. You, as a DM, you have to create an adventure and a hook for your players to play, but you don't have to create everything else around it. If you
Right.
have that flavor for it, then please do. That's a wonderful thing. It is great to have more information, more creations, more worlds, more alternate universes to play in, but it's never a necessity. And as usual, your mileage may vary. If it's something you want to do, then go for it and utilize the stuff, but never feel you have to.
I love it, man. I love it. I think it's been a really great talk about what people can do to get started in the homebrewing exercise and activities. And if anyone has already been doing that, I think they definitely got some extra little pieces of information they can use to help them. And anyone else that feels a little intimidated by the process, you got a whole lot to inspire you, I think. And we've definitely mentioned a lot of places to start. And that's what it's all about. Find a place
Mhm.
to start and just grow from there. I mean,
Exactly.
let it evolve on its own. Um, yeah, can't really think of anything else we could add for this. Is there anything else you can think of?
No, but remember, if anything we've said helps you out, that's wonderful. Both Darsh and I are always available to sit and chat for a bit. If there's something more intimate that you want to talk about with world creation that we didn't cover here, between the two of us, we have a wealth of information we can share and are happy to do it.
Yeah.
Um, Anything coming up for initiative roles as of late, sir?
No, we're still running classes every Sunday, so feel free to sign up. Go to initiativeroles.com, check out our schedule. We do improv training classes for dungeon masters and players of the game Dungeons and Dragons, as well as any other variety of tabletop playing games you may be running at home with your friends. And then I know we got some other projects. John and I are working on some pretty fun things. It'll probably be, it'll become newsworthy eventually. We can't really talk too much
Yeah.
about it at the moment, but some cool stuff is in the works. Yeah, if you guys have any questions or comments, definitely drop them in below. We mentioned at the beginning, hit the like and subscribe. It's a very small effort on your part, but it does a lot to help us out because YouTube likes the algorithm. And if you guys
Yeah.
show engagement, then it makes it more likely that someone else is going to see it pop up in their feed. And we're just here to help. I mean, we're offering free content. We just want to be able to, help you guys make your games better. So, let us do that and take
If
advantage
you
of us.
poke the button, it does the thing.
Yeah, exactly. Poke the button, it does the thing. And yeah, drop comments down below. We're happy to take comments and answer questions, and give us some suggestions on other things we can talk about later. Otherwise, I'm Richard Darshwood from Initiative Rolls, where adventure grows wild from the roots of spontaneity.
And I am John Cowgell from the Night Owl Gaming Society, and come sit at my table. Let me help you tell a story.
And we're glad you came in. So have a great day, guys. Appreciate you.